Aquarius 12. People on stairs graduated upwards. So the essential mystery here is the mystery of progression. We all have this sense of wanting to improve ourselves and move into a greater expression, a fuller and richer expression of who we are. And we don't really know yet who we are. We might have a pretty clear idea about, roughly speaking, what we might be able to do and what we think and believe. But what we can do, what potentially we could do, is never knowable. We can't know that because there's no limit to it. An horizon is never reached. It is simply expanded. And that's very definitely true of our lives. So we're talking about the whole inclination towards moving up. And, you know, if we were given the moon today, we'd want the sun tomorrow. There's no way that we can actually be fulfilled. And that's wonderful. That sense of fulfillment sounds as though it's the answer to everything. That's what would make us happy, but it's just not true. There's no sense in which perfection is a better state of being than perfecting. Because perfecting is vital, it's alive, it's changing towards better. And that sense of improvement is a wonderful feeling. And if we're perfect, we can't improve. And this is true on the highest level. God cannot be considered perfect. It's just silly to say that. It's a very great limitation on our own inspired vision to say so. It's the case that we're all of us, including God, and the very least of the animals, all of us, everything alive, is trying to be more so, and just to see all of the infinite combinations of possibilities that there are. So on a personal level, we want to find out whether we can do this, that, and the other. Not or the other, but and the other. We want and in our lives. This is a deep motivating force of anyone with any life energy. They always want it to be a little bit more so. So the idea that we're progressing necessarily involves the idea that there's something better to progress to. And the way in which we progress very often involves emulating someone who's taken a step earlier than us, who's a little bit further along. In other words, unequal. We don't have any advantage in considering ourselves to be equal to everyone else. It's just not true. It was a teaching at some point to limit the aspirations of those who have the appetite to move forward. But it's just not true. We're not all equal. By no means. We're very definitely graduated. And were it not for that, we could not progress. So the sense of moving forwards towards more and more must not be tarnished by the idea that we could ever succeed or fail. Because even a step in a certain direction that leads to what we consider a failure is nevertheless an experience of great worth. And that develops within us a sense of greater wisdom, greater ability to finesse situations. So whatever we do, failure or success in somebody else's terms, is necessarily a real success in our terms, because it's a movement, and every movement is necessarily a progression, because we're moving towards greater and greater experience, which brings greater and greater self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is actually more quickly gained through not quite getting things right. The trial and error process of life is pointless without the error. We have to be willing to try things, knowing that some of them won't work, and they're actually the best ones in terms of our progression. So what we have to do really is to understand that any movement at all is better than no movement. So if you're actually in a situation which you've been in a long time and it doesn't inspire you anymore, it doesn't excite you, there's no enthusiasm for it, same old, then move, do something in some direction of significance, move, progress. That's the teaching here. And the reluctance to do that is based on a fear-based idea of lack or inability to cope with the unknown. And that's just isn't borne out by one's life experience. We do cope. Even with the most terrible circumstances, we do cope. We can't do anything else, because the only way out of here is die. Just to die is death. And that's actually the prize. Otherwise, we're actually in life and therefore meeting new people, new situations, new ideas, new world circumstances that we have to adapt to. So we don't really have any choice about whether we're going to change. We are going to change. If we're reluctant to change, then that will create the friction in our lives that creates the stress and the unhappiness. The willingness to change allows us to flow with that which we cannot control. And that flow is healthy. That allows us to experience surrender. And when we experience surrender, we surrender to the highest. And the highest within us and our knowledge of God are identical. So we're given to understand that in any situation, we have skills, we have experience, we have contact, we have resources of all types. And our task is simply to be aware of all of that, the colours in our palette, and just to come up with something to respond to circumstances, whether they are pressure-based circumstances, asking a response of us, requirements, in other words, or opportunity, which draws us into making a creative choice. We have the experience and skills necessary to deal with everything that comes up, and we have to remember that and have faith in that, to trust that. And even if you feel a bit timid about making a step in a certain direction, because you're thinking of the 1,000 steps that follow and the lack of security that's implied, nevertheless, one small step is all that's necessary at a time. And that small step is simply looking at your own set of resources and seeing what best fits the situation to move you forward towards your vision. It is very important to understand that we can never gain fulfillment in the outer world. It will not happen. It cannot happen. It should not happen. That's not the juice. That's simply the feedback device, our life experience out there, the people we have in our lives, the tasks, the pressure, the stress. That's the feedback for what's actually real. And the inner sense of self is what is important. Now here we can reach fulfillment. And it is only by doing that that we will ever get anything like fulfillment in the outside world. The outside world is ever changing, and you cannot hold your position. Even if you built up a lot of money, a lot of assets and so on, something comes along, a war, a forest fire, and everything's lost in a moment. Nothing that we have in the outer world is actually permanent. Everything that we have in the inner world is ours. That's the gold. We don't measure that in the terms that the worldly experiences suggest, in terms of success and titles and money and things. That's not a measurement of how well we're doing inwardly. When was the last time you were angry or depressed or stressed out or confused? Was it recently? Can you remember when? Then you need to do work on yourself, because when you get to a certain level of being, you can't remember the last time you were angry. You can't remember the last time you were confused or depressed or unable to cope. You just can't remember it. It just leaves you. You can get to that state of inner tranquility. And that is fulfillment. And most assuredly, there are people who are more so than you, than I, than everyone. There's that gradation, that graduation. There's somebody above you always. And yet there also is someone who's not at your level. That's always the case. We're in between those who are better than us and those who are not. And this is the case. So towards those who are not at our level of comprehension and stillness of being, we help them if we can. We offer help anyway. To those above us, we emulate them. We ask for advice and help and guidance. And then it all works. That's the natural order of things. In Sufism, this is described by the concept of the democracy of the ego. On the ego level, we try and share and be equal in importance. But on the level of soul, it's the aristocracy of the soul. You can be an aristocrat on that level, better than others.